The hospital hallway smelled like disinfectant and grief. Ethan stood outside room 307, his hands shaking as he stared at the closed door. He was 23 years old, and he had never felt more useless in his life. Inside that room, his best friend was dying. Michael had been more than a friend. He had been the older brother Ethan never had, the man who taught him how to throw a punch, how to fix an engine, how to be decent. And now Michael was gone. Ethan pushed the door open. Sarah sat beside the empty bed, her face pale and hollow. She held her daughter Emma close, the little girl's face buried in her mother's shoulder. The machines had been turned off an hour ago. The silence was unbearable. "Sarah," Ethan whispered. She looked up at him, and her eyes were dead. "You shouldn't be here." "I promised him," Ethan said, stepping forward. "I promised I'd take care of you, both of you." Sarah laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You're just a kid, Ethan. You don't understand anything." She stood up, pulling Emma with her. "Go home. Go live your life. We'll be fine." But her voice cracked on the word fine, and Ethan saw the truth. She wasn't fine. She was drowning, and he had no idea how to save her. Not yet. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. And if you believe stories like this should keep being told, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's see how an impossible promise became something neither of them expected. 6 months passed like a slow funeral. Sarah worked 2 jobs now, waitressing at a diner during the day and cleaning offices at night. Emma stayed with a neighbor most evenings, a kind older woman who charged half of what the daycare wanted. Sarah's body ached constantly. Her hands were raw from scrubbing floors. She had stopped looking in mirrors because the woman staring back was a stranger, hollowed out and exhausted. Michael's life insurance had covered the medical bills and the funeral, but nothing else. The house they had rented together was too expensive now. Sarah had moved into a smaller apartment on the edge of town, a place with thin walls and a leaking faucet she didn't have time to fix. Emma's toys were packed in boxes she couldn't afford to unpack. The little girl asked about her father less often now, and that hurt more than anything. Ethan showed up every Sunday. He never called ahead. He just appeared at the door with his toolbox and a quiet determination. He fixed the faucet. He patched the hole in the drywall. He replaced the broken lock on the bathroom door. Sarah told him to stop coming, but he never listened. He would ruffle Emma's hair, make her laugh with silly faces, and leave before Sarah could say thank you. "You don't owe us anything," Sarah told him one Sunday afternoon as he replaced a burnt-out light bulb in the kitchen. "I know," Ethan said simply. He climbed down from the stepladder and looked at her. "But Michael was my brother, and you're his family. That makes you mine too." Sarah wanted to argue, but she was too tired. Instead, she poured him a glass of water and watched as Emma dragged him to the living room to play with her dolls. The sight made her chest tighten. Emma hadn't smiled like that in months, but the peace didn't last. Michael's parents, Richard and Margaret Hayes, had been absent for most of Michael's life. They were old money, the kind of people who measured worth in stock portfolios and country club memberships. When Michael married Sarah, a waitress with no college degree, they disowned him. They didn't come to the wedding. They didn't meet Emma until the funeral. And now, 6 months later, they wanted to make up for lost time. They showed up at the diner on a Tuesday morning. Sarah was carrying a tray of pancakes when she saw them walk in, Richard in his tailored suit, and Margaret in pearls that probably cost more than Sarah's car. Her stomach dropped. They didn't sit in her section. They sat at the booth by the window and waited. Sarah delivered the pancakes, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked over. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes," she said carefully. "What can I get you?" Margaret smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We'd like to talk, dear." "Sit down. I'm working." "Then take a break," Richard said. It wasn't a request. Sarah glanced at her manager, who nodded reluctantly. She slid into the booth across from them, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "We've been thinking about Emma," Margaret began. "She's our only grandchild. We barely know her." "That's not my fault," Sarah said quietly. "No," Richard agreed, "it's ours. We made mistakes with Michael. We see that now. But Emma deserves better than what you can give her." Sarah's blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" Margaret leaned forward, her voice soft and condescending. "You're struggling, Sarah. Anyone can see that. You work yourself to the bone, and for what? A cramped apartment? A child who barely sees her mother?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. "We're not heartless. We want to help." Richard slid the folder across the table. Sarah opened it with trembling hands. Inside were legal documents, custody papers. "We're proposing shared custody," Richard said. "Emma would live with us during the week. You'd have her on weekends. She'd attend the best schools, have the best opportunities. You'd be free to rebuild your life." Sarah's vision blurred. "You want to take her from me. We want to give her a future," Margaret said firmly. "Look at yourself, Sarah. You're drowning. How long before you can't keep up anymore? How long before child services gets involved?" "That's not going to happen," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "Are you sure?" Richard's tone was ice. "Because from where we're sitting, it looks inevitable." Sarah stood up so fast the table shook. "Get out." "We're not leaving until you sign," Margaret said. "I said get out." The diner had gone silent. Every customer was staring. Sarah's manager hovered nearby, his expression nervous. Margaret and Richard didn't move. They sat there, calm and certain, like they had already won. And then Ethan walked in. He wasn't supposed to be there. He worked construction across town, and it was the middle of the day, but he had stopped by to drop off a bag of groceries he knew Sarah needed, things she was too proud to ask for. He saw her standing at the booth, saw the tears on her face, saw the strangers in expensive clothes staring her down. "Sarah?" he called out. She turned, and the relief in her eyes was instant. Ethan crossed the diner in 3 strides and stood beside her, his presence solid and grounding. "Is there a problem?" he asked, looking between Sarah and the haze. "And who are you?" Richard asked, his tone dismissive. "I'm Ethan," he said simply. Then, without thinking, without planning, he reached out and took Sarah's hand. Her fiancé. Sarah's head snapped toward him, her eyes wide. Margaret and Richard exchanged a glance. "Fiancé?" Margaret repeated, her voice dripping with skepticism. "That's right," Ethan said. He squeezed Sarah's hand, silently begging her to play along. "We're getting married." The words hung in the air like a live grenade. Sarah's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Richard leaned back in the booth, studying Ethan with cold calculation. "How convenient," Richard said slowly. "A fiancé appears just as we're discussing Emma's future." "It's not convenient," Ethan said. "It's the truth." Margaret smiled again, sharper this time. "Then I'm sure you won't mind proving it. If you're truly engaged, you'll have a wedding date, a marriage license, something more than empty words." "We'll have all of that," Ethan said. His jaw was tight, but his voice didn't waver. "Give us 30 days. Richard stood, buttoning his jacket. 30 days, he agreed. "If you're not married by then, we're filing for custody. And believe me, Sarah, we will win." They left without another word. The diner slowly came back to life, the murmur of conversation resuming. Sarah pulled her hand away from Ethan's and stared at him like he had lost his mind. "What did you just do?" she whispered. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But we'll figure it out." "Figure it out?" Sarah's voice rose. "You just told them we're getting married. We're not even dating, Ethan. This is insane." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, his own panic starting to set in. "But they were going to take Emma. I couldn't just stand there and let that happen." Sarah pressed her hands to her face, trying to breathe. "They're serious. They'll drag me through court. They'll dig into every part of my life. And when they find out we lied—" "Then we don't lie," Ethan interrupted. "We actually do it." Sarah stared at him. "You want us to get married? For real?" "No," Ethan said quickly. "I mean, yes, but just on paper. Just for the 30 days. Long enough to prove to them that Emma's in a stable home. After that, we can get it annulled. No one has to know. Everyone will know," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "This town talks, Ethan. And what about you? You're 23. You should be out living your life, not playing house with a widow and her kid." "I'm not playing," Ethan said quietly. "Michael asked me to take care of you. I'm doing that." Sarah shook her head. "This isn't what he meant." "Maybe not," Ethan admitted, "but it's what we've got." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for doubt, for hesitation, but all she saw was the same stubborn determination that had brought him to her door every Sunday for 6 months, the same quiet strength that had held her together when she wanted to fall apart. 30 days, she finally said. 30 days, Ethan agreed, and just like that they made a deal neither of them understood, a deal that would change everything. They sat in Sarah's car outside the diner for 20 minutes after her shift ended. neither of them speaking. Emma was still with the neighbor. They had time to talk, but neither knew where to start. "We need rules," Sarah finally said. Ethan nodded. "Okay. You'll move in. They'll check. They'll want to see that we're living together." Her voice was clinical, detached like she was reading from a script. "But you sleep on the couch. We keep separate rooms." "Agreed." "And Emma," Sarah's voice cracked, "we don't confuse her. We don't tell her you're her new father. You're just helping out." Ethan's chest tightened. "Whatever you need. This ends in 30 days, Sarah continued. "We go to the courthouse, we show the Hayes the marriage certificate, and then we figure out how to undo it quietly." "Okay." Sarah finally looked at him. "Why are you doing this, Ethan? Really?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because Michael loved you more than anything in the world, and because Emma deserves to stay with her mom. That's it. That's the reason." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was all he could say. The next day they went to the courthouse. The clerk barely looked up as they filled out the paperwork. There was no ceremony, no witnesses, no white dress or flowers. Just 2 signatures on a piece of paper, and a stamp that made it official. Ethan wore his work jeans. Sarah wore the same uniform she'd wear to the diner later that afternoon. When they walked out, Sarah stared at the marriage certificate in her hands like it was written in a foreign language. "I can't believe we just did that," she whispered. "We did what we had to do," Ethan said. That evening, Ethan moved in. He didn't have much, just a duffel bag of clothes, his toolbox, and a laptop he barely used. Sarah showed him to the couch, handed him a pillow and a blanket, and disappeared into her room without another word. Emma came home an hour later. She saw Ethan sitting on the couch and her face lit up. "Ethan," she squealed, running to him. He caught her in a hug, lifting her off the ground. "Hey, kiddo, are you staying for dinner?" "I'm staying for a while, actually," Ethan said, glancing at Sarah. Emma's eyes went wide. "Really?" Sarah knelt down beside her daughter. "Ethan's going to be living with us for a bit. He's going to help Mommy out. Is that okay?" Emma nodded so hard her pigtails bounced. "Can we play after dinner?" "Absolutely," Ethan said. That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah and Ethan sat at the tiny kitchen table, eating leftover pasta in silence. The apartment felt smaller with him there, but not in a bad way, just different. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly. "For today, for all of this." Ethan shrugged. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do." She set down her fork. "I know this is crazy. I know I'm asking too much." "You're not asking," Ethan said. "I'm offering." Sarah studied him in the dim light. He looked so young, but there was something in his eyes that wasn't. Something steady and unshakable. 30 days, she said again, like a reminder to herself. 30 days, Ethan echoed, but neither of them believed it anymore. The first week was awkward. Ethan woke up at 5 every morning, careful not to wake Sarah or Emma. He showered quickly, made coffee, and left for the construction site before the sun came up. Sarah would wake an hour later, get Emma ready for kindergarten, and rush to the diner. They barely saw each other except in passing. 2 strangers living in the same small space pretending to be something they weren't. But Emma noticed everything. "Why does Ethan sleep on the couch?" she asked one morning as Sarah braided her hair. Sarah's hands faltered. "Because that's where he's comfortable." "But you and Daddy used to sleep in the same bed." Sarah's throat tightened. "That was different, honey." "Why?" "Because it just was." Sarah tied off the braid and kissed the top of Emma's head. "Go brush your teeth." Emma skipped away, and Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. This was supposed to be simple. 30 days of pretending, and then life would go back to normal. But nothing about this felt simple. The second week, things shifted. Ethan started coming home earlier. He'd pick Emma up from the neighbor's house, bring her back to the apartment, and help her with the simple homework her kindergarten teacher assigned. Sarah would come home from her evening shift to find them sitting at the kitchen table, Emma's tongue sticking out in concentration as she traced letters on worksheets, Ethan patiently guiding her hand. "You don't have to do this," Sarah said one night, exhausted and grateful in equal measure. "I know," Ethan said, closing Emma's workbook, "but she's a good kid, and you're working too hard." Sarah wanted to argue, but she couldn't. He was right. She was working too hard, and having him there, having someone to share the weight, felt like breathing after months underwater. By the third week, routines had formed. Ethan cooked breakfast every morning, simple things like scrambled eggs and toast. but it meant Sarah didn't have to rush. Emma started asking him questions about his day, and he'd tell her stories about the construction site, exaggerating the mundane into adventures. She giggled at his impressions of his grumpy foreman and gasped when he described the crane lifting steel beams into the sky. "You're so brave," Emma said one evening, her eyes wide. Ethan laughed. "I'm just a guy with a hammer, kiddo." "But you build things," Emma insisted. "That's important." Sarah watched from the doorway, something warm and painful twisting in her chest. Emma hadn't smiled this much since Michael died. And Ethan, this 23-year-old kid who should have been out with friends or chasing his own dreams, was sitting on her worn carpet playing dolls with a 5-year-old like it was the most important thing in the world. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan fixed Sarah's car. The check engine light had been on for weeks and she'd been ignoring it because she couldn't afford a mechanic. He spent 3 hours in the parking lot with his toolbox, covered in grease and sweat, until the engine purred smoothly again. "How much do I owe you?" Sarah asked when he came back inside. "Nothing," Ethan said, washing his hands at the sink. "Ethan," "Sarah, stop." He dried his hands and turned to face her. "You don't owe me anything. This is what people do when they care about each other." The word care hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was ready to name. That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah did something she hadn't done in months. She sat on the couch beside Ethan instead of retreating to her room. They watched an old movie on the tiny television, the volume low so they wouldn't wake Emma. Sarah fell asleep halfway through, her head tilting onto Ethan's shoulder. He didn't move. He sat there, barely breathing, terrified of waking her. When the movie ended, he carefully shifted her so she was lying on the couch, covered her with the blanket, and went to sleep on the floor beside her. He told himself it was just to make sure she was comfortable, but the truth was, he didn't want to be far away. The Hays called twice during those 3 weeks. Each time, Sarah answered with Ethan standing beside her, coaching her through the conversation. Margaret's voice was always sharp, probing for cracks in their story. Richard asked pointed questions about their living arrangements, their finances, their plans for the future. "We're very happy," Sarah said each time, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. "Good," Margaret replied, though her skepticism was palpable. "We'll be checking in soon, in person." When Sarah hung up, her hands were shaking. "They don't believe us," she said. "They don't have to," Ethan replied. "We just have to keep going." But the pressure was building. Sarah started having nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, convinced that Emma was gone. She'd stumble into the hallway, peek into Emma's room, and only relax when she saw her daughter sleeping peacefully. Ethan started waking up when she did, listening to her quiet footsteps in the dark, wishing he knew how to make it better. The midpoint came on a Thursday night. A summer storm rolled in without warning, lightning splitting the sky and thunder shaking the thin walls of the apartment. Emma woke up screaming. Sarah ran to her room, but Emma was inconsolable, sobbing and clutching her stuffed rabbit. "It's okay, baby," Sarah murmured, holding her. "It's just a storm." "I don't like it," Emma cried. "It's too loud." I know. But Emma wouldn't calm down. She'd been scared of storms ever since Michael died. Something about the noise, the chaos, reminded her of the hospital, of the machines, of losing her father. Sarah rocked her, sang to her, but nothing worked. Ethan appeared in the doorway. "Can I try?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded, exhausted. Ethan sat on the edge of Emma's bed and gently took her hand. "Hey, kiddo, you remember what your dad used to say about storms?" Emma sniffled, her eyes red. "No. He told me once that storms are just the sky's way of cleaning itself. All the bad stuff gets washed away, and when it's over, everything's brighter." Ethan's voice was soft, steady. "Your dad loved storms. He used to sit on the porch and watch them." "Really?" Emma whispered. "Really?" Ethan smiled. "And you know what else? He used to sing during storms. Want me to teach you the song?" Emma nodded. Ethan started singing, his voice low and unpolished but sincere. It was an old folk song, something Michael had taught him years ago during a camping trip. The melody was simple, the words about rain and rivers and coming home. Emma listened, her breathing slowing, her grip on the rabbit loosening. By the time Ethan finished, Emma's eyes were heavy. "One more time?" she asked sleepily. Ethan sang it again, and this time Emma hummed along, her voice barely a whisper. When he finished, she was asleep. Ethan carefully tucked the blanket around her and stood. Sarah was still standing in the doorway. tears streaming down her face. "Sarah?" Ethan whispered, alarmed. "What's wrong?" She shook her head, unable to speak. Ethan guided her into the hallway, closing Emma's door softly behind them. "I'm sorry," Sarah finally managed. "I didn't mean to." "You don't have to apologize," Ethan said. "That song." Sarah's voice broke. "Michael used to sing that to her. Every night before bed. I forgot about it until now." Ethan's chest tightened. "He taught it to me. I didn't think—" "No," Sarah interrupted. "It was perfect. She needed that. I needed that." She wiped her eyes, trying to pull herself together. "You're so good with her. Better than I am sometimes." "That's not true." "It is." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in weeks. "You make her happy. You make this place feel less empty." The air between them shifted. The storm outside was still raging, but inside the apartment everything was quiet. They stood in the narrow hallway, inches apart, and for a moment, Sarah forgot that this was supposed to be temporary. She forgot about the rules they'd set, the 30-day deadline, the lies they were telling. All she saw was Ethan, the boy who had grown into a man when she wasn't looking, the man who had stepped into her life when it was falling apart and held it together with his bare hands. "Ethan," she whispered. He leaned in without thinking. Sarah didn't pull away. Their lips were almost touching when reality crashed back in. "I can't," Sarah said suddenly, stepping back. "I can't do this. Sarah, you're too young for this mess." Her voice was shaking. "You're 23. You should be out there living your life, not stuck here playing house with a widow and her broken kid." "Emma's not broken," Ethan said sharply, "and neither are you." "Yes, I am." Sarah's tears came harder now. "I'm broken, Ethan. I'm guilty every single day. Guilty that I'm still here and Michael's not. Guilty that I'm even thinking about—" She stopped herself. "This was a mistake. All of it. It wasn't a mistake," Ethan said, his voice fierce. "And I don't care about age, Sarah. I don't care that you're older or that you have a daughter or that this is complicated. I care about you. I've cared about you for months, maybe longer." Sarah stared at him, her heart hammering in her chest. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do." Ethan took a step closer, but didn't touch her. "I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying I want this to be real. Not just for 30 days. Not just to prove something to your in-laws. Real." The words hung between them like a bridge neither of them knew how to cross. "I can't give you what you want," Sarah said finally. "I don't even know how to be a person anymore, let alone someone's wife." "Then don't be my wife," Ethan said. "Just be Sarah. That's all I'm asking." But Sarah shook her head and walked to her room, closing the door behind her. Ethan stood alone in the hallway, listening to the storm, feeling something crack inside his chest that he didn't know how to fix. He went back to the couch, but he didn't sleep. And in her room, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. The next morning, they didn't talk about it. Sarah left for work early. Ethan took Emma to school. They moved around each other like ghosts, polite and distant, the warmth of the past 3 weeks evaporating overnight. But Emma noticed. She always noticed. "Are you and Mommy fighting?" she asked Ethan as he drove her to kindergarten. "No, kiddo," Ethan said, forcing a smile. "We're fine." "You don't look fine." Ethan glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Sometimes grown-ups have things to figure out, but it's nothing for you to worry about, okay?" Emma frowned. "I don't want you to leave." Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm not going anywhere." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure he believed it. The 4th week started, and the distance between them grew. Sarah worked longer hours. Ethan spent more time at the construction site. They still lived in the same apartment, still kept up appearances when necessary, but the connection they'd built was fracturing, and neither of them knew how to stop it. On day 25, Margaret and Richard showed up unannounced. Sarah was at work, and Ethan was home with Emma. They were baking cookies, flour dusting the kitchen counter, Emma's laughter filling the small space. When the knock came, Ethan wiped his hands and opened the door. Margaret's cold smile greeted him. "Ethan, how lovely. May we come in?" He had no choice. Of course. They swept into the apartment like they owned it, their eyes cataloging every detail. The couch where Ethan slept, the pile of his clothes folded neatly in the corner, the photos on the wall that didn't include him. "Where's Sarah?" Richard asked. "At work," Ethan said, keeping his voice neutral. And you're here alone with Emma? Margaret's tone was sugary poison. How domestic. Emma peeked out from the kitchen, cookie dough on her cheek. Grandma, Grandpa. Hello, darling, Margaret cooed, her entire demeanor changing. Come give Grandma a hug. Emma hesitated, then walked over. Margaret embraced her tightly and Richard patted her head. We wanted to see how you're doing, Richard said. Are you happy here? Emma nodded. Ethan's teaching me how to make cookies. Is he? Margaret's smile didn't waver, but her eyes found Ethan's, sharp and calculating. How nice. They stayed for an hour, asking questions, watching everything. Ethan felt like an animal in a zoo. When they finally left, Margaret paused at the door. You're very devoted, she said to Ethan. It's almost believable. It's not an act, Ethan said quietly. We'll see, Richard replied. 5 more days, Ethan. 5 more days, and we'll know for sure. When Sarah came home that night and Ethan told her what happened, she didn't say anything. She just sat at the kitchen table staring at her hands. We're going to make it, Ethan said. 5 more days. We can do this. Can we? Sarah asked, her voice hollow. Ethan didn't have an answer. Day 28 arrived like an executioner's blade. 3 days until the deadline, and the walls were closing in. The Hayes had been quiet since their visit, but that silence felt worse than their interrogations. Sarah knew they were planning something. She could feel it in her bones, the same way she'd felt the cancer eating away at Michael before the doctors found it. Ethan had barely slept in 2 weeks. He lay on the couch every night staring at the ceiling, replaying that almost kiss in the hallway, wondering if he'd destroyed everything by being honest. Sarah had built her walls back up, higher and thicker than before. She spoke to him only when necessary, her voice polite and empty. Emma was the only one who seemed oblivious, but even she was starting to ask questions. Why doesn't Mommy smile anymore? She asked Ethan one morning as he made her breakfast. Ethan flipped a pancake, avoiding her eyes. She's just tired, kiddo. She's always tired, Emma said, her small voice filled with a wisdom no 5-year-old should have. And you look sad too. I'm not sad. Yes, you are. Emma climbed onto a kitchen chair and studied him seriously. Did you do something bad? Ethan set down the spatula and knelt beside her. No, sweetheart. I didn't do anything bad. Sometimes adults just have complicated feelings. What kind of feelings? The kind that are hard to explain. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But I promise, everything's going to be okay. Emma nodded, but she didn't look convinced. That afternoon, everything fell apart. Sarah was at the diner when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her step into the back alley and pick up. Mrs. Hayes? A man's voice asked. Professional. Cold. Sarah's stomach dropped. Yes? This is Detective Morris. I've been hired by Richard and Margaret Hayes to conduct a background investigation regarding the custody case for Emma Hayes. Sarah's knees went weak. I don't understand. I'm calling as a courtesy to inform you that my investigation is complete. I'll be submitting my findings to the family court judge tomorrow morning. What findings? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I'm not at liberty to discuss details, but I will say that certain inconsistencies have come to light regarding your recent marriage to Mr. Ethan Cole. There was a pause. I'd recommend you speak with a lawyer, Mrs. Hayes, soon. The line went dead. Sarah stood in the alley, her phone clutched in her shaking hand, the noise of the kitchen behind her fading to white noise. They knew. Of course they knew. The separate bedrooms, the rushed courthouse wedding, the complete absence of any romantic history between her and Ethan. A professional investigator would have torn their story apart in days. She called Ethan. He answered on the first ring. Sarah, what's wrong? They know. Her voice cracked. They hired a detective. They know we're lying. Silence on the other end. Ethan, I'm here. His voice was tight. Where are you? The diner. But I can't stay. I need to go home. I need to think. Don't do anything yet. Let me— There's nothing to do, Sarah interrupted. It's over. They're going to take her and there's nothing we can do to stop it. She hung up before he could respond. When Sarah got home, Emma was at the neighbor's house. Ethan was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. He looked up when she walked in, and the devastation in his eyes mirrored her own. We need to talk, Sarah said. I know. She sat down across from him, not beside him. The distance felt intentional, final. I should never have let you do this, Sarah said. I should never have dragged you into my mess. You didn't drag me, Ethan said. I volunteered. And look where it got us. Sarah's laugh was bitter. They're going to expose us in court. They're going to prove this marriage is a sham. And then they're going to use it as evidence that I'm an unfit mother, that I'm a liar, that I'd do anything, even commit fraud to keep my daughter. It's not fraud, Ethan said. We're legally married. On paper. Sarah's voice rose. We're married on paper, Ethan. We don't share a bed. We barely share a conversation anymore. Any judge with half a brain will see through this. Then we make it real, Ethan said desperately. We move into the same room. We act like an actual couple. Stop. Sarah held up a hand. Just stop. Why? Because it's too late. Sarah stood up, pacing the small living room. Because they already have everything they need. Because pretending harder won't change the facts. And because... She stopped, her back to him. Because I can't keep doing this to you. Doing what? Using you. Sarah turned around, tears streaming down her face. You're 23 years old, Ethan. You should be out there finding someone your own age. Someone without baggage. Someone who can actually give you a real future. Instead, you're here, trapped in a fake marriage with a woman who's too broken to love you back. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Is that what you think? Ethan's voice was quiet, dangerous. That I'm trapped? Aren't you? He stood up, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw anger flash across his face. You don't get to decide that for me, Sarah. You don't get to tell me what I want or what I deserve. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need your protection. Ethan's voice cracked. I'm a grown man. I made my choice. I chose to be here. I chose you and Emma. And yeah, maybe it's messy and complicated and scary, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. But it is wrong, Sarah said, her voice breaking. Don't you see? Michael asked you to take care of us, and you took that to mean you had to sacrifice your entire life. But that's not what he meant. He would never have wanted this for you. You don't know what he wanted. Yes, I do. Sarah wiped her eyes. He wanted you to be happy, to have your own life, your own family someday, not this imitation. Ethan stared at her, his chest heaving. And what about what I want? Does that not matter? Of course it matters. Then why won't you listen to me? Ethan took a step closer. I want to be here. I want to help Emma. I want to be with you. Not because Michael asked me to. Not because I feel obligated. Because I care about you. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about a promise and started being about something real. Sarah shook her head. It can't be real, Ethan. Not with everything that's happening. Not with the haze breathing down our necks. Not with a court date looming, and not when I'm still... Her voice broke. I'm still in love with my dead husband. I wake up every morning and forget he's gone. I reach for him in bed and find empty space. How is that fair to you? I'm not asking you to forget him, Ethan said softly. I'm not trying to replace him. Then what are you trying to do? I'm trying to be someone you can lean on. Someone who makes this life a little less heavy. That's all. Sarah closed her eyes. But that's not enough. Not for you. Not in the long run. Let me decide what's enough for me. I can't. Sarah opened her eyes and they were filled with resignation. The detective's report goes to the judge tomorrow. By the end of the week, the Hayes will have filed for custody, and they're going to win, Ethan. We both know it. The best thing I can do now is minimize the damage. What does that mean? It means this marriage was a mistake. Sarah's voice was steady now, cold, decided. It means you need to go. Ethan felt like he'd been punched. What? Move out. Tonight. If the judge sees that we've separated voluntarily, it might look better than having them prove we were lying. That's insane. It's strategic, Sarah said. I'll tell the judge the truth, that we got married in haste, that we realized it wasn't working, that we're getting it annulled. It won't save me, but at least it might keep them from completely destroying my character. And what about Emma? Ethan's voice was shaking. What about what she wants? She's 5 years old. She doesn't get a vote. She loves me, Sarah. I know. Sarah's composure finally cracked. God, I know she does. But loving you isn't enough to keep her safe. The Hayes have money, lawyers, connections. They can drag this out for years. They can make my life hell. And the longer you stay, the worse it gets for everyone. So that's it? Ethan's voice was hollow. You're just giving up? I'm protecting my daughter, Sarah said. That's what mothers do. And what about protecting yourself? What about letting someone help you carry this? I've been carrying things alone for a long time, Ethan. I'll manage. He stared at her, searching for any sign that she didn't mean it, that this was just fear talking, but all he saw was exhaustion and defeat. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. Maybe, Sarah admitted, but it's my mistake to make. Ethan didn't argue anymore. He went to the corner where his clothes were folded, packed them into his duffel bag and grabbed his toolbox. Sarah watched, her arms wrapped around herself, her face expressionless. When he reached the door, he paused. I need you to know something, he said without turning around. I don't regret any of this. Not the marriage, not moving in, not falling for you and Emma. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Sarah's breath hitched, but she didn't respond. And when you realize that pushing me away was the wrong choice, I'll still be here. Maybe not in this apartment, but somewhere, waiting. He opened the door and left. Sarah stood alone in the silent apartment, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. When she heard his truck start and drive away, she sank to the floor and sobbed. An hour later, the neighbor brought Emma home. The little girl walked in, her backpack bouncing, her smile bright. Where's Ethan? She asked immediately. Sarah's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. He had to go back to his own place, baby. Emma's smile vanished. Why? Because... Sarah struggled to find words that wouldn't be lies. Because sometimes people can't stay together, even when they want to. But I want him to stay, Emma said, her voice small and breaking. I know, sweetheart. I know. Emma's face crumpled. Is he coming back? Sarah wanted to say yes. She wanted to promise that everything would be okay, that Ethan would walk back through that door, that they'd be a family again. But she'd promised herself she wouldn't lie to her daughter anymore. I don't know, she whispered. Emma burst into tears and ran to her room, slamming the door behind her. Sarah sat on the couch, buried her face in her hands, and wondered if she'd just destroyed the last good thing in their lives. The next 3 days were agony. Emma refused to eat. She stopped talking almost entirely, responding to Sarah's questions with nods or shakes of her head. At night, Sarah heard her crying through the thin walls, calling for Ethan. Sarah tried to comfort her, but Emma turned away every time. You made him leave, Emma said on the second night, her voice accusatory and heartbreaking. You always make people leave. The words cut deeper than any blade. On the morning of day 30, the courthouse envelope arrived. Inside was a notice of a custody hearing scheduled for the following week. Attached was the detective's report, and reading it made Sarah feel sick. The report detailed everything: the separate sleeping arrangements, the lack of any romantic history, interviews with neighbors who'd never seen them act like a couple, bank statements showing they'd never combined finances, even a timeline proving they'd gotten married exactly 1 day after the Hayes had threatened custody. It was damning, irrefutable. The end. Sarah called her public defender, a tired woman named Lisa who'd been assigned to her case. We need to discuss a settlement, Lisa said after reading the report. The Hayes are willing to negotiate. What kind of settlement? Shared custody, 60-40 split in their favor. Emma lives with them during the school year, with you on weekends and holidays. No, Sarah said immediately. Sarah, I understand this isn't what you want, but given the evidence, I said no. Sarah's voice was steel. I'm her mother. I'm not giving her up. Then we go to trial and we lose. The judge will see this report and rule against you completely. You could lose all custody. Then I lose all custody, Sarah said. But I'm not agreeing to give her away without a fight. Lisa sighed. The hearing is in 5 days. I'll do what I can. Sarah hung up and stared at the wall. She'd pushed Ethan away to protect Emma, and now she was going to lose her daughter anyway. The irony was suffocating. That night, Emma finally spoke more than 3 words. She came into the living room where Sarah was sitting in the dark and climbed onto her lap. Mommy? Yes, baby? Did Daddy leave because of me? Sarah's heart stopped. What? No, sweetheart. Why would you think that? Because I was too loud, or too much trouble. And now Ethan left too, so maybe it's me. Sarah held her daughter so tightly she was afraid she'd break. Listen to me, Emma. Listen very carefully. Daddy didn't leave. He got sick and his body couldn't fight anymore, but he loved you more than anything in the whole world. And Ethan. She swallowed hard. Ethan didn't leave because of you either. He left because I made him. Why? Because I was scared. And sometimes when grown-ups are scared, they make really stupid choices. Emma pulled back and looked at her mother with those big, knowing eyes. Do you love Ethan? Sarah opened her mouth to deny it, but the lie wouldn't come. I think I might, she whispered. Then why did you make him go? Because I didn't think I deserved him, and I didn't want to hurt him. But you did hurt him, Emma said simply. And you hurt me too. Sarah's tears came hard and fast. I know, baby. I know. And I'm so sorry. Emma hugged her mother tightly. Can you fix it? I don't know how. You could say sorry. That's what you always tell me to do. Sarah laughed through her tears. You're right, that's exactly what I should do. But before she could figure out how to make things right, the world came crashing down one more time. The next morning, Richard Hayes called. I thought you should know, he said, his voice smug. We've accelerated the hearing. It's tomorrow at 9 a.m. The judge reviewed the detective's report and agreed that Emma's situation is urgent. We'll see you in court, Sarah, and we'll see you without your fake husband. He hung up before she could respond. Sarah sat on the couch, the phone in her hand, and realized she was out of time. The hearing was tomorrow. Ethan was gone. Emma was heartbroken, and she was about to lose everything. She'd pushed away the one person who could have helped her, and now she was going to face her worst nightmare alone. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, staring at the custody papers, watching the hours tick away. At 3 a.m, she walked to Emma's room and stood in the doorway, memorizing the sight of her daughter sleeping peacefully, clutching her stuffed rabbit. By tomorrow night, this might not be her home anymore. The thought made Sarah's chest constrict so tightly she could barely breathe. At 7 a.m., she woke Emma gently. We have to go somewhere today, baby. Emma rubbed her eyes. Where? Just a meeting, with some people. But I need you to be very brave, okay? Emma nodded, sensing the gravity in her mother's voice. She got dressed without complaint, and they drove to the courthouse in silence. Sarah's hands shook on the steering wheel. She'd dressed in her only good outfit, a simple black dress that had hung in her closet since Michael's funeral. It felt like a bad omen. The courthouse was cold and imposing. Sarah held Emma's hand as they walked through the metal detectors, past the security guards, down the endless hallway to courtroom 4B. Lisa, her public defender, was waiting outside. They're already here, Lisa said quietly, nodding toward the Hayes family sitting on a bench across the hall. Richard in his immaculate suit, Margaret with her pearls and cold smile. Between them sat their lawyer, a shark in expensive Italian leather. Emma squeezed Sarah's hand tighter. Are those the people who want to take me away? Shh, baby, Sarah whispered. Not now. But Margaret had heard. She stood and approached, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Emma, darling, she said sweetly. How are you? Emma hid behind Sarah's legs and didn't answer. Margaret's smile tightened. Still shy, I see. Well, don't worry. After today, we'll have plenty of time to work on that. Sarah's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Engaging would only make things worse. Where's your husband? Richard asked, appearing beside Margaret. He looked around theatrically. I don't see him. Trouble in paradise already? That's enough, Lisa interjected. Save it for the judge. Richard smirked. As you wish. They retreated to their bench and Sarah felt sick. This was a game to them, a power play. Emma wasn't a person to them. She was a possession, a legacy, a do-over for the son they'd lost. At 9 a.m. the bailiff opened the courtroom doors. Hayes versus Hayes custody hearing. All parties enter. Sarah's legs felt like lead as she walked inside. The courtroom was smaller than she'd imagined, wood-paneled and formal, with an American flag in the corner and a judge's bench that seemed impossibly high. Judge Andrea Morrison was already seated, a black woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. Be seated, Judge Morrison said. Everyone sat. Sarah kept Emma close. The little girl pressed against her side. Across the aisle, the Hayes sat with their lawyer, confident and composed. I've reviewed the materials submitted by both parties, Judge Morrison began. This is a custody modification hearing regarding the minor child Emma Hayes. Mrs. Hayes, you're currently the sole custodial parent. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, the paternal grandparents, are seeking shared custody. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, the Hayes lawyer said smoothly. Your Honor, Lisa stood. We object to this modification. Sarah Hayes has been a loving, capable mother. There's no evidence of neglect or harm. Perhaps not neglect, the Hayes' lawyer countered, standing, but instability. Your Honor, if I may present the detective's report. Judge Morrison nodded. Proceed. For the next 30 minutes, Sarah sat in agony as the Hayes' lawyer systematically destroyed her life. He presented the detective's findings with clinical precision: the rushed marriage, the separate bedrooms, the testimony from neighbors, the bank statements, the timeline that proved everything had been orchestrated to block the custody petition. Mrs. Hayes entered into a fraudulent marriage, the lawyer concluded. She used Mr. Ethan Cole as a prop to create the illusion of stability, but the illusion shattered almost immediately. Mr. Cole has already moved out. The marriage is over, and Emma is living in a home defined by chaos and deception. Lisa tried to counter, but there was nothing to say. Every fact was true. Every piece of evidence was damning. Judge Morrison looked at Sarah. Mrs. Hayes, do you have anything to say in your defense? Sarah stood on shaking legs. Your Honor, I made mistakes. I got married for the wrong reasons. I was desperate, but desperation doesn't make me a bad mother. Emma is loved. She's cared for. Your Honor, if I may, the Hayes' lawyer interrupted. We're not claiming Mrs. Hayes is abusive. We're simply arguing that Emma deserves better than instability. My clients can provide her with the best schools, the best opportunities, a stable home with 2 parents who are committed to her future. 2 parents she barely knows, Lisa shot back, who disowned their own son for marrying Sarah, who didn't meet Emma until the funeral. This isn't about what's best for Emma. It's about control. That's a baseless accusation, the Hayes' lawyer said coldly. Judge Morrison raised a hand. Enough. I'll hear from the child. Sarah's blood went cold. Your Honor, she's 5 years old. Old enough to express a preference, Judge Morrison said. She looked at Emma. Sweetheart, can you come up here? Emma clung to Sarah. I don't want to. It's okay, the judge said gently. You're not in trouble. I just want to ask you a few questions. Sarah had to physically pry Emma's fingers from her dress. The little girl walked slowly to the judge's bench, her head down, her shoulders hunched. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Emma, do you know why we're here today? Emma nodded. Can you tell me? Because they want to take me away from Mommy. Emma's voice was so small Sarah barely heard it. And how do you feel about that? Emma's lip trembled. I don't want to go. I want to stay with Mommy. I understand, Judge Morrison said, but sometimes grown-ups have to make hard decisions. Your grandparents have a big house. They can give you a lot of things. Wouldn't you like that? I don't care about a big house, Emma said, tears starting to fall. I just want to be with Mommy, and I want Ethan to come back. Sarah's heart broke all over again. Who's Ethan? Judge Morrison asked. He's Mommy's friend. He used to live with us. He made breakfast and fixed things and sang songs. He was nice to me. Emma wiped her eyes. But Mommy made him leave. And now everyone's gone. Daddy's gone, Ethan's gone, and now they want to take me away too. Why does everyone leave? The courtroom was silent. Judge Morrison's expression softened. Sweetheart, no one's trying to hurt you. Everyone here loves you. Then why are they trying to take me away from the person I love most? Emma's voice cracked and she started sobbing. I just want my Mommy. I just want Ethan. I just want us to be a family again. Sarah stood, unable to stay silent any longer. Your Honor, please. She's begging you. Don't do this to her. But before Judge Morrison could respond, the courtroom doors burst open. Ethan walked in. He was wearing the same suit he'd worn to Michael's funeral, slightly rumpled, and a size too small in the shoulders. His hair was messy, his face unshaven, and he looked like he'd driven through the night, but his eyes were clear and determined. I'm sorry I'm late, Your Honor, he said. The bailiff moved to intercept him, but Judge Morrison waved him off. And you are? Ethan Cole, Sarah's husband. The Hayes' lawyer stood immediately. Your Honor, Mr. Cole is not a party to this case. He has no standing here. Maybe not legally, Ethan said, but morally, I have every right to be here, because that little girl just said she wants me back, and I'm not going to let her down again. Judge Morrison studied him. Mr. Cole, I've read the detective's report. Your marriage to Mrs. Hayes appears to be fraudulent. It started that way, Ethan admitted. I won't lie to you. We got married because Sarah was desperate and I wanted to help, but something happened along the way. It became real, at least for me. Real enough that you moved out? The Hayes' lawyer said mockingly. I moved out because Sarah pushed me away, Ethan said, looking at her. She thought she was protecting me. She thought she was protecting Emma, but all she did was break all our hearts. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Ethan turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I'm 23 years old. I don't have money or a fancy house or a law degree, but I love that little girl like she's my own daughter. And I love her mother, even though she's terrified to let anyone in. I know this looks bad. I know the detective's report makes us sound like con artists. But we're just two broken people trying to build something good out of the wreckage. And Emma deserves to see that. She deserves to see that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, even when it's messy, especially then. Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment. That's a lovely speech, Mr. Cole, but the court deals in facts, not feelings. Then here's a fact, Ethan said. Emma has lost one father already. If you give her to the Hayes, you're making her lose another one, because they'll cut Sarah out. They'll cut me out. They'll erase everything she knows and loves and replace it with their version of what a family should be. Is that really what's best for her? Or is it what's convenient for them? Your Honor, the Hayes' lawyer protested. This is completely inappropriate. But Judge Morrison held up a hand. I'll allow it. She looked at Ethan. Mr. Cole, if I don't grant this custody modification, what happens next? You and Mrs. Hayes reconcile? You move back in and play house again? No, Ethan said. We stop playing. We commit, for real this time. Not because of a deadline or a legal battle. Because we choose each other. Because Emma deserves parents who are all in, not halfway. He walked over to Sarah, who was trembling in her seat. He knelt beside her. Sarah, I know you're scared, he said softly. I know you think you're protecting everyone by keeping them at arm's length. But you're not. You're just making everyone miserable, including yourself. He took her hand. I don't care that you're older. I don't care that you still love Michael. I don't care that this is complicated. I just care that you and Emma are happy. And I know I can help with that. If you'll let me. Sarah's tears fell freely now. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do, Ethan said. You deserve someone who fights for you. And I'm not going anywhere. Not this time. Not ever. Emma had been watching from beside the judge's bench. Now she ran down and threw her arms around both of them. Please don't fight anymore, she sobbed. Please. Sarah held her daughter tightly and looked up at Ethan. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I pushed you away. I know, Ethan said, and I forgive you. Judge Morrison watched the scene unfold, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. This is highly irregular, she said, and frankly, this entire situation is a mess. She looked at the Hayes. But Mr. Cole is right about one thing. Emma has already lost her father. Removing her from her mother's care would cause further trauma. And despite the circumstances of the marriage, I see genuine care here. Genuine commitment. The Hayes' lawyer stood. Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows. I've seen the evidence, Judge Morrison interrupted. And I've also seen a little girl begging not to be separated from her mother. In custody cases, the child's best interests are paramount. And right now, Emma's best interest is stability, keeping her with the parent she knows and loves. Richard Hayes stood angrily. This is outrageous. That woman is a fraud. Sit down, Mr. Hayes, Judge Morrison said sharply. Another outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. She turned back to Sarah. Mrs. Hayes, I'm denying the custody modification. Emma will remain in your sole custody. However, I'm ordering family counseling, and I expect you and Mr. Cole to prove that this marriage is legitimate, not through words, but through action. I'll review this case again in 6 months. If I see more instability, more deception, we'll be back here. Am I clear? Yes, Your Honor, Sarah whispered. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You have a lot of work to do. Judge Morrison looked at the Hayes. As for you two, you're entitled to supervised visitation, 1 weekend per month, if you can behave civilly. Margaret looked like she'd swallowed poison, but Richard nodded curtly. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. We're adjourned. The courtroom erupted into motion. Lisa was gathering papers, the Hayes' lawyer was arguing with his clients, and the bailiff was ushering people out. But Sarah didn't move. She sat there, holding Emma and Ethan, unable to believe it was over. We won, she whispered. No, Ethan said. We survived. Now we have to actually live. 6 months later, the apartment looked different. Not because they'd moved or redecorated, but because it felt like a home now instead of a hiding place. Ethan had officially moved back in, this time into Sarah's bedroom. It had taken weeks for Sarah to feel comfortable sharing that space again, and Ethan had been patient, letting her set the pace. Some nights she woke up crying, reaching for Michael out of habit. Ethan would hold her until she fell back asleep, never once making her feel guilty for her grief. Emma was in kindergarten, thriving. She talked about Ethan the way she used to talk about Michael, with uncomplicated love and trust. She called him Ethan, not Dad, and that felt right. He wasn't replacing anyone. He was just becoming himself in their lives. The Hayes visited once a month, as ordered. The visits were strained and formal, but Emma tolerated them. She was polite, even kind, but she never asked to stay longer. When Sarah picked her up, Emma would run into her arms and say, "Can we go home now?" Home. That word meant something again. Sarah had quit one of her jobs. Ethan's construction work was steady, and together they were making it work. Not comfortably, but enough. They'd even started saving for a small house, something with a yard where Emma could play. The counseling sessions were hard. The therapist made them talk about things they wanted to avoid, made them confront their fears and insecurities. But slowly, painfully, they were building something real, something that could last. On a Saturday morning in early spring, Ethan made pancakes while Emma colored at the kitchen table. Sarah walked in, still in her pajamas, her hair a mess, and wrapped her arms around Ethan from behind. "Good morning," she murmured. He turned and kissed her forehead. "Good morning." Emma looked up from her drawing. "Are you guys being gross again?" "Extremely gross," Ethan confirmed. Emma giggled and went back to her coloring. Sarah looked at the life they'd built, piece by fragile piece, and felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Peace. That afternoon they went to the cemetery. It was something they did once a month, the three of them together. Emma brought flowers she'd picked from the neighbor's garden, with permission this time. They stood at Michael's grave, and Sarah told him about their lives, about the court case, about Ethan, about how Emma was growing and changing every day. "I hope you're okay with this," Sarah said quietly. "I hope you understand." Ethan put a hand on her shoulder. "He does. I know he does." Emma placed her flowers on the grave. "Hi, Daddy. I miss you, but I'm okay now. Mommy's okay too, and Ethan takes really good care of us." She paused. "I think you'd like him." Sarah's tears fell, but they weren't only sad anymore. They were complicated, grateful, full. As they walked back to the car, Emma held both their hands, swinging between them. "Know what I think?" Emma said suddenly. "What, kiddo?" Ethan asked. "I think love doesn't run out like I loved Daddy, and I still do. But now I love you too. And that doesn't mean I love him less. It just means my heart got bigger." Sarah stopped walking and knelt down. "That's exactly right, baby. That's exactly how it works." Emma smiled. "So Mommy can love Daddy and love you, because hearts are magic like that." Ethan's eyes stung, but he smiled. "Yeah, they really are." That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah and Ethan sat on the porch of their apartment building, watching the stars. Sarah leaned against him, his arm around her shoulders. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Getting into this mess?" "Never," Ethan said. "Do you?" Sarah thought about it, about the fear, the pain, the uncertainty, about almost losing everything, about finding something she never expected. "No," she said, "not even once." They sat in comfortable silence until Sarah spoke again. "Ethan? Yeah, I love you." It was the first time she'd said it out loud. Ethan's breath caught. "I love you too," he whispered. And for the first time since Michael died, Sarah believed that maybe, just maybe, she was allowed to be happy again. That love didn't have an age limit or an expiration date. That family wasn't about biology or perfection. It was about showing up every single day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. 6 months later, at the follow-up hearing, Judge Morrison reviewed their file. The counseling reports were positive. Emma's school records showed improvement. The family was stable. "I'm satisfied with the progress," Judge Morrison said. "The case is closed. Custody remains with Mrs. Hayes." Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, your visitation rights stand. Everyone's dismissed. As they walked out of the courthouse, Emma between them, Sarah realized something. They weren't playing house anymore. They weren't pretending. They were just living. Messily, imperfectly, beautifully living. And that was more than enough.